Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode. This time on the podcast, we have Zoeb. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Yash. Thanks for having me.
We have this ritual on the show on which we ask the guest to introduce themselves because I'm typically bad at introductions. So, yeah,
Okay.
Zoeb. Who is Zoeb Ali Khan? What
So
does
it
he do?
depends. Do you want a short introduction, long introduction?
We have a lot of time on our hands, so as extensive as you can be.
uh, cool. I'm Zoeb. I work at Sauce VC, which is a early stage consumer fund. I've been working with them since we sort of started right since day zero. I also started my career in startups, and I I mean, more about me on a personal side. I spend free time doing air pistol shooting, and I generally follow startups wherever I can, and also into a little bit of sports. Yeah.
Talk me through air pistol shooting. How does that work? Like before we get into the meat of the discussion, let's talk about all these things.
Yeah. So it's sort of in the family. So
Mm-hmm.
my dad used to shoot for India. He was Arjuna Awardee, but he used
Mm-hmm.
to do double trap shotgun shooting
Hmm.
and trap as well. My brother also shoots, and just got exposure to it as a kid. Um, and I do it for fun, right? And I, I think a lot of people may look at it as a boring sport, but I find it very relaxing. So yeah, it's been a couple of
Interesting.
years. It's. I don't know if in Mumbai, since where you are, right, there are a bunch of air gun ranges that you can try out, and they're also open to like just general public to go and try it out. So I highly recommend you trying it.
Very interesting. So let's this question. I mean, I wasn't planning to ask you this question, but I think in general,
Yeah.
people sort of misrepresent the VC space a lot because they have been they probably watch Shark Tank India or something similar. I mean, which does not
Yeah.
define the VC space as well as it should be. Despite the fact how good it was for the general startup ecosystem. I mean, everybody started talking about startups because of Shark Tank India, but in general, in let's say for like a 15-year-old, what is a VC firm? What does it do? What does it say?
So wait, you want me to answer the misrepresentation or what does VC do? They're two different questions. Like,
Okay, let's go one by one, right? So because the thing
yeah.
is, people sort of fail to realize that most VCs do not have their own money. Like they have limited partners who fund pool in their money, and then there's separate folks who sort of try and invest in certain companies. So things like that. The general misconceptions about the funding world, like that's what I was asking.
No, so okay, so firstly, uh, you so there are different kinds of funds, right? That you
Hmm.
can invest through, right? For example, if it's a syndicate, that's different through which you have a bunch of people who from which you invest. If it is a fund, which is let's say
Mm-hmm.
in India, you have alternate investment fund, which is uh, you know uh, governed by SEBI, and we report to SEBI. Uh, in order to launch a fund of that kind, you have to put in a sponsorship amount, which is what the general partner puts in, right?
Hmm.
Um, Now that by that definition, you have to put in your own capital, right? And in order to also raise money from other investors, the first question they'll ask you is how much is it in it for you, right? So
Hmm.
um, yes, there are obviously employees who work for the fund who, let's say, perhaps don't have their own money invested into it, right? You could say that, okay, there's someone who's working for the fund may not have their own money, but see, the way funds are structured, most of them do have shared economics. So
Hmm.
you do have an incentive for, I mean, naturally for the fund to do well. Because if your fund doesn't do well, if your startup doesn't do well, then you don't do well as an investor. So it is a lot more uh, incentivized in that sense. I
Mm-hmm.
think at least at Source, it's pretty well structured in that sense. Um, and see, in terms of the misrepresentation, see, I think. Uh, I think what happens is that if you look at this asset class, right? It is an asset class which is expected to generate a much higher rate of return, right?
Yes.
20 to 30%, whereas an index generates, between 10 to 15%, right? Now, in order to generate that higher set of return, there is a higher degree of risk that you have to also take up. And what happens is that because you take up a lot more risk, um, two things happen. One is that when you're unable to recognize that risk really, really well, um, you have sort of don't do a good job as an investor. And I think you get a lot more criticized for that as opposed to taking a safe bet, right? So I think that's one outcome
Hmm.
of not managing that risk. But the ones who do end up managing it well, right? Like a firm which manages to control risk, and thereafter generate that kind of return, they will end up getting a lot of good press, right? And having said that, it's also possible for that one fund to uh, take a risky bet which doesn't work, it fails, and at the
Hmm.
same time also manage to do it with the rest, right? So, for example, in a fund, it's very possible that, you know 40 to 50% of I mean, I'm being generous, but like 40 to 50% of the investments
Hmm.
don't work. But the ones which do, I mean, they can work so well that, as they say, they return the entire fund,
Yeah.
right? So I think you have to go a little bit more into detail, um, to see sort of understand what funds do well, what funds don't. And I think, apart from this, also I think there's also a lot of privilege that comes with the job, and I think it's important to not misuse that. And I think maybe that's what also gives it a little bit of bad rep, that because you are custodians of capital, and
Hmm.
honestly, you know, uh, it actually comes with a lot of fiduciary responsibility as well, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not putting in like some ancestral wealth, right? This is money that someone has worked hard, earned, and then
Hmm.
committed to giving us. We have to, uh, give it out very responsibly, right? And I think as long as you have these systems in place, um, this asset class can actually do really, really good, right? So, for example, um, I mean, I can get a bit more philosophical here, but like, uh,
Sure.
talking over Google Meets, right? Google got venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
You know, before we started this conversation, we were talking about coffee and Blue Toka. We're talking Blue Toka is a venture capital backed company.
Yes.
Uh,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure you look around your room, I could tell you venture capital was,
For sure.
too responsible, right? So I think net over the long run, I think there is a lot positive that it can bring, and I think me especially. I mean, I've
Hmm.
been in the business, right? I think that's what one focuses on, and it tries to make sure that you stay balanced when you are working here. Um, so yeah, so that's on the misrepresentation, bit of a longish answer. And what is
Hmm.
VC? See, if I had to tell a 15-year-old, right, I would say that a VC manages money for typically high net worth or individuals, or like richer individuals, uh, because uh, unlike a mutual fund, this is not accessible to everybody. And you manage that fund and you invest in startups or new ideas, right? If I had to discuss it for Sauce, these would be typically consumer brands or consumer plays. That's what venture capital does.
Sure. I think that cleared a lot of confusions for our listeners. Other than that, how mature do you think is the Indian VC ecosystem? Because I've asked this question to I think almost every VC that has been on the show, and everybody have has like very different answers to this. I asked this to Siddharth Shah back in the day, and he had like a huge. I think we talked for like 10 minutes straight on this topic. So, what do you think? What do you think the current ecosystem in India is like for the VC space?
You know, See, for example, depends on who you ask, right? I can compare it to what I saw when I started my career. Okay,
Sure.
so I can let me do that. Like, I started my career in 2015, right? So how does it look like from there, right? Um, Definitely a lot more funds, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
means a lot more capital is in the ecosystem. You have a lot more social acceptability. You have a lot more good outcomes, right? You have so many IPOs that have happened. Um, you have so many more sectors where things are happening, right? So compared to when I started, it is definitely so much more mature uh, in terms of every aspect, right? Number of founders, people, quality of ideas, quality of companies, things which are happening, outcomes, everything is better. Um, but comparing it to, let's say, China or the US, Southeast Asia, or Middle East, I wouldn't know. I'm not really that well versed with those ecosystems, but I can tell you from my own experience, I do think it's a lot better, and I think it'll only get better. Right? I think there's a lot more opportunity in the next 5 years for more brands to come up, possibly more funds to become bigger, better, more exits, more outcomes, more wealth creation. Maybe more sectors getting action. Right? I think all that could happen.
Interesting. What are we missing at least in the Indian VC ecosystem? Like something that you wish changed.
I think we're still waiting for. Uh, I think I would love to see even bigger outcomes, man. Like, I don't think that's missing. I think it's more a function of time. For
Mm-hmm.
example, you have a company like Tencent, which has come out of China, which is huge, right?
Yep.
I mean, I would love to see $1 trillion venture capital backed company outcome. And why not? Why not from India?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think now there is a lot of stuff happening around manufacturing and a lot more built in India, but for the world, right? So I think uh, not necessarily something in the ecosystem, but I think the kind of outcomes and the kind of companies they're trying to build, which can be far bigger with far
Mm-hmm.
greater outcomes, right? And why not? With if we've reached a certain level now, I think we can reach even a higher level, even further, right? Like, uh, there's no reason for there to be. Let's say if I just look at consumer goods, right? There's no
Yes.
reason why you can't have a personal care company, for example, launched out of India, which is able to manufacture for the world and export to the world. Or, for example, we have, let's say, Mokobara, right, which is a luggage company. I don't see why Mokobara can't sell globally. XYXX, I don't see why that can't sell in all of Asia. Uh, or Whole Truth, right? I think, or even dominate, especially in our own backyard, right? Um, so I think all that is something that I can look forward to, and I think maybe not missing, but I think it's a function of time,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest.
Interesting. What do you think about the semiconductor sector in general? Because that was like the talk
I,
of the town.
I honestly don't know much, man. I wouldn't know
Mm-hmm.
much about semiconductor. I mean, I know that uh, it's an important component. I
Mm-hmm.
know that you have all of it concentrated in TSMC, right? Taiwan, which
Yeah.
does a lot of it. I know that's important for India to have its own semiconductor base. But I think there are better investors, better people working on that problem. I really don't know much. I'm focusing on my sector.
Interesting. So let's get to consumer VC, right? So,
Yeah.
what is consumer VC? What are the challenges that you guys tackle? Like, how do you guys scout for good consumer companies? How does that work? How is that different from other VC spaces?
So consumer VC is just a preference that we have where we are focusing on um, consumer brand industry. So, example, apparel, personal care, lifestyle, wellness. Uh, Selectively would be even e-commerce or um, so a consumer VC is just someone who chooses to focus on certain sectors. Similarly, you also have VCs who focus on, let's say, just deep tech or just SaaS, right? So a consumer VC is just a specialist VC, right? How is it different from tech? I think, multiple ways. One is that, um, see, I think with brands, the market uh, typically is sort of a little bit more well defined, right? Like we have a men's innerwear company. Like, it's already defined what the innerwear is, right?
Sure.
So in markets, obviously you can innovate here and there on brand, on product, maybe on supply chain. Uh, but the market's sort of established. I think in tech, perhaps again, markets are also established, right? But it uh, it could also end up maybe establishing a new market altogether, right? Let's say uh, with smartphones, right? It's completely new kind of technology that we're using,
Yeah.
um, and even within that, I would say that. I think the way they scale is a bit differently. Like a consumer tech app, for example, or like a social media app could scale very very quickly. With consumer brand, there is some limitation because you have to supply that product, right? You have to
Sure.
have distribution. It's not like people can download your product overnight, right? It's different in that sense. Also, I think the way people build their funds are a little bit different. Um, um, you for example, uh, I think in tech sometimes the outcome can be much bigger. um,
Yeah.
Although Mama Earth has sort of broken
Sure.
all the barriers around that as well, but I think it can be very different in terms of how they scale up. um,
Is the space more riskier in general, like the consumer space more riskier in general in terms, let's say in comparison to like the SaaS space?
no, I see. I think see again, what is riskier is a perception thing, right? Depends on the
Interesting.
investor. For example, I could say that if let's say I'm making a consumer brand, I would argue that if I'm making something like a chocolate, right? People would buy chocolates. Why would they not buy chocolates, right? Um, with the SaaS, you could argue that maybe there's someone who wouldn't find a fit for it, but then B2B is probably easier to sell than to a consumer. You have to
Sure.
get them to switch, right? So it really depends on the investor and their understanding of the space, how they think about exits, right? I could say that okay, in India you just had Tata Consumer exit or buyout chains, or you had yoga bars sell to ITC. With SaaS, I am not familiar with any exits, but at the same time, you have the kind of profit metrics a company like Wingify does.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of economics in India, in a consumer company, right? So it really depends, man. Like you can't say one or the other. It's what is well suited for the individual, the investor, the guy who's doing it.
What quirks have you noticed in Indian consumer behavior while investing in the consumer space?
Um, so quirks, as in you mean, is there something
The way
that
people
was?
spend money, like where are they most attracted to? Like what price segment are they more comfortable in spending? Is online a more convenient way to purchase if the average order value is high? Like what data points have you observed in the past few years?
See, I think India has a lot more spending appetite now. Like, I think it's just been increasing last couple of years. I think you look at the premiumization that's happening, people wanting to buy. Uh, the aspiration is very high, for sure, right? I think that exposure to uh, the whole digital world, right, gives you that aspiration to want everything, right? And I think the Indian consumer is very aspirational. Value for money is very, very important. I think that doesn't change. Nobody wants to like spend unnecessary capital. I think there's a lot of money being spent on perhaps status signaling, right? You have hair fall companies which do very well, like because nobody wants to um, lose hair. You have people spending a lot on beauty. It's grown so much, right? This entire space. Um, and if you ask me online, yes, it is increasing day by day, right? I think people's comfort with uh, Zomato, Swiggy, Blinkit, even not just ordering from these apps, but also consuming content more and more digitally. YouTube, just look
Mm-hmm.
at the top 20 YouTubers and the kind of content they have. Like it's clear that people are just consuming more and more stuff here. Um, so I think it's to summarize for sure. You see a lot of evolution here and there, right? I think online is definitely increasing. You see premiumization for sure. You see aspiration for sure, right? All these things are
Mm-hmm.
happening for the Indian consumer.
Very interesting. So I think before the conversation you said you love design, right? So
Yeah.
what consumer brand do you think is the most well designed? Let's say from India.
I mean, I end up talking about my own companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Mokobar is very well designed products,
What's that?
functionality, and I think XYXX is really comfortable. They've done, I think, for
Mm-hmm.
the price point, it's really, really good. Um, the way they're sold. I think if I had to pick outside of our investments, so if I let me think sector wise, like so we've not done something like India में consumer electronics, at least nothing that's too aspirational for me, but I think there's still a
Mm-hmm.
lot of good design that's come out. Um, Personal care, there's so much, right? So many different brands which have come up.
What do you
There's
think about Subco?
coffee, yeah, coffee for sure, right? I think Subco I've unfortunately not tried, but I do like the branding a lot. I think Blue Tokai, Third Wave, both really, really nice, well designed. Products are good. Um, And there's actually now that I'm thinking about it, I'm getting stuck with it because there's so many examples I can think of,
Yeah.
right? Because all of them are so well designed, right? But yeah, honestly, you see it everywhere, man. Like wellness products, apparel, personal care. It's really improved the game a lot. There's a brand called Headway which does
Anyway,
drinkware, which is really cool.
what do you think about like the reward sector? Like let's say the way cred works, or let's say FinTap, even Flash in,
I
in,
mean,
in that case.
I don't use cred that much.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's definitely a very attractively designed app for sure. I don't think I've seen an app like that. I've not used FinTap. Zeroda Kite is actually very well designed,
It's a very lovely interface. Yes.
very clear. I like Grow as well. I use Grow as well. They're also very well designed. So now that again, now you're opening my mind to other sectors, right? So
Yeah.
definitely in fintech, also this is happening. So generally, dude, like it's a good time to be an Indian consumer. You're seeing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
good stuff happening, right? And I think, like I said, like this digital consumption, it
Mm-hmm.
is also very democratic, right? Like someone who's not in a metro city, they are seeing, okay, this is how the world dresses. Like for example, Gen Z fashion, right? It is people will be buying this stuff across India, right?
For
And at the
sure.
same time, even someone who's in metros who's also consuming this, they're also seeing what's happening globally. And okay, they're like, I don't want classic coffee that I've been getting. I want something a little bit more
Yeah.
differentiated, and that's where Blue Tokai comes up. So it's happening across categories and whatnot. So it's and you, I mean, honestly, there's this really good Aventus D2C report.
Mm-hmm.
That is, and they cover so many sectors,
What's the
right?
name of the
Like
report again?
I think it's the Aventus D2C landscape report. I think it came out in
Okay.
2021, 22, I don't remember. But they go through every sector, right? Like literally there is premiumization and good differentiation happening everywhere. In
Mm-hmm.
dairy, you have something like Country Delight or Epigamia. In meat, there's Licious or Fresh to Home. They're also like
Mm-hmm.
premiumizing that experience. Personal care, there's so many that have
So
come
many.
up.
Yeah.
Our own company, West. I could just go on and on, man. Like this is anyway my full time job. So it keeps happening. In fintech, also you brought up the example that's there. Maybe there are more sectors also that I'm not thinking of.
What do you
Maybe
think
other.
about let's say the VR space? Let's say not India specific, but in general, like the AR VR space now, like after the Vision Pro, the way it was announced, it was launched. What do you think about that space in general? Because I recently gave like a presentation on it, like not recently, it's been like a month, and I think it's
Okay.
an interesting place to be.
Yeah.
What do you think
See
about it?
here. So I'm not going to speak as an investor of the VR space. Okay.
For sure.
I'm going to speak to you as as just a normal consumer. So I have tried the Oculus Quest,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Meta's product,
Yeah.
and I went to this VR film festival last year, and I
Hmm.
tried it out. Um, Personally, I think the quality of animation is still a bit behind. I think
Hmm.
for that true immersive experience, I think when I play Xbox and I see the graphics, I think that's a lot more immersive than the quality I'm getting in VR right now. Maybe I didn't see some very good films, but at least what I saw,
Hmm.
the quality was just not right there. It is definitely very immersive, right? Um, After a while, it just did start like I can't wear it too long. Um, so I found that as a constraint. But um, I think that if the graphic games are ups to like Xbox or PS5
Hmm.
level, I think it can be an even more superior immersive experience for gaming, for watching films for sure. Because again, the more immersive you become, the more excited you are about it.
Hmm.
Uh, I also liked. And in terms of how it works for computing, right? I haven't tried that, but
Hmm.
at least the demo I saw of how it's very Iron Man film like.
Yeah.
And it's. I think that's interesting because I think personally, if I get to like just organize shit like this with my hands, I think that is intuitive. That could
For
be
sure.
pretty interesting. So so uh, I am positive. I think it could develop into many interesting use cases, but I do think that you cannot spend too much time into it because I mean,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, what's real is real, and all of
Hmm.
that always trump a virtual experience, but it can be a very fun thing.
Very interesting. Do you think the initial VR trend that was, I think that was 2018, 2017, that died out because there was not a lot of things to do in VR. But like now, as we sort of venture into AR plus VR, things would be better because like once you, as you said, once you introduce computing, there's an entirely different landscape, right? Like I think the reason why Apple launched it or like sort of soft launched it recently was for the developers to sort of build apps and experiences on the Vision Pro. That's what I think. I think that's why they priced the Vision Pro at some ridiculous amount. I think it was some $3,500, whereas you can get like a Quest at I believe like $300 or less. Like I think the
Yeah.
general like what I think about Apple in general is like they set stage for something which is probably coming in the next few years. Like they did the same way. I think there was this the first GUI computer that Apple launched like failed miserably. I think it was the Lisa or something. But that sort of set stage for I believe the first Alto, which was the first GUI computer. That sort of. What do you think about the Apple's philosophy in general when it comes to the consumer space?
Well, I mean, I have used. I mean, I don't use Apple as much as I used it when I was growing up.
Hmm.
We used the iMac. I've used the classic old school iBook, iPhone, the first
Hmm.
one, the ecosystem. See, I mean, it's definitely very well designed. I think uh, they have marketed their product, and the way they build their brand is uh, different than any company on earth. It's probably one of the best tech companies ever, right? And full disclosure, I've invested in the company, so um, it's uh, it's also a great company to invest in. Um, and I mean, it has so much pop culture significance, right? Like
Hmm.
it is very impactful, right? Um, Having said that, um, you also look at India, like they are growing so much here, so it's clearly a product people are wanting to buy, more so of. It's something that people really love, and I think what I see is once you get into the ecosystem, you just continue
Yeah.
using it. And I think they've also branded it in that manner that uh, it's more for that fun, creative thinking and more flowing and it, it's a very interesting company for sure. I would love to actually read more about Apple. I've just seen like films and documentaries, but Love to read more about that company. It's definitely something we almost all of us can sort of learn from. So
Interesting.
there's a lot to sort of uncover there in terms of the way they've designed things, branding, the impact on pop culture, the way they've changed so many things, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
way the iPhone, that's how we sort of use our phones now, right?
Yeah.
Um, and maybe I can get a bit, I mean, go a bit nostalgic and go back in time,
Mm-hmm.
but like, I remember when I got my iPod Nano, which is like a small one with screen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was obsessed with that shit. Like, I think I would
Sure.
be able to watch films like in it's a small screen, but still,
Mm-hmm.
and the music, and then just uh, swiping, music. And at that time, you didn't have. I mean, I don't think you had streaming, and I would download music, most of it
Yeah.
illegally, which I don't do, and I don't encourage
We
anyone to
don't
do.
endorse. Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
I used to like organize all my music just so that I could scroll and get those
Mm-hmm.
albums, see that. And that was just such an enjoyable experience because that joy of music and the first time I got that from using iTunes, right, on that iPod.
Hmm.
It's just simple things like that which make uh, something that you enjoy anyways
For
much
sure.
more enjoyable.
Do you
So
know about
that's how.
the
Yeah,
calculator story? Like the iPad
nice.
calculator story. So if you have an iPad around, you can just go look for a calculator, and you'll not find like a stock calculator app on it,
Okay.
which is very weird because everything else Apple has, it has its own calculator app. Funnily, the story is from when Steve Jobs first launched iPad, and he's mainly a design guy. He it
Yeah.
turns out. So he had his tech lead, and then these guys, what they did was they just scaled up the normal iPhone's calculator app into like a bigger screen, and they were like, okay, fine, we're shipping it like this. And Steve Jobs was like, okay, no, I want like a very well designed
Yeah.
proprietary app for like this screen
Yeah.
size. And that's what happened, and they just never ended up releasing a calculator app, which is quite weird, because I think a calculator is like a very very normal utility based
Yeah,
like application that you need, but
for
it's
sure.
still not there, which is funny. I think it's like a quirk that Apple has, right? Which is, I think quirks in products in general sort of have this weird legacy onto it. Like even if you
Hmm.
think about, let's say, the Casio A158 watch, like if you think about that, like the
Yeah, the one in
even I
wearable.
have one. I recently got. I'm wearing the Enticer at the moment, but I do have that one. If you see the
This one
light,
is just pure nostalgia.
yeah, you know what? I'll get mine. 1 second, just a second. I hope it didn't took too much time, but yeah, like the quirks with this product in general. If you look at the light thing, it's
Yeah,
literally is the most useless light
yeah,
you might get on a
that's
watch, right?
true.
But still, the quirk that it has, like the way it's just there, it just makes it kind of iconic. Like, I could have gotten the A150, A165 as well, which is I think the one with the electroluminescence, but the way the light shines on this product just makes it a little bit more classic, or just has its own legacy on it. And that's something I think maybe Apple
For
was looking
sure.
for, and that's why they haven't.
Yeah, and this is
I,
like
mhm.
it's a simple digital screen, right?
Yeah.
It's I would argue it is like fun to look at and well designed and for I mean like that retro vibe
For sure.
gives.
I think Casio in general as a consumer brand is very interesting, because I think the next comparable thing to Casio is probably HMT, which is probably shutting down now.
Yeah.
But
Are
I
you
think
into
that was,
watches? Are you
yeah,
into
I'm into
watches?
watches. I'm into watches.
Dude, so I did a horology class, uh, watchmaking
Interesting.
class
Hmm.
last Sunday. It was really interesting, and we took a HMT watch,
Mm-hmm.
mechanical watch. We unassembled it, then we assembled it back again.
Which one was it?
It wasn't a specific watch. It was 17 joules, just the movement.
Hmm.
So it didn't have a
Interesting.
dial and a face. So you just assembled and assembled back. Um, I mean, you appreciate like the mechanical watches and the workmanship that goes into it because there are like 10 to 12 tiny screws. Okay, then there are
Yes.
like 10, 12 different components, and all of them have to be placed in that particular sequence in such precise, patient manner that is not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's cup. and this is like a
For sure.
regular watch that they got for us to try. I mean, imagine like the more sophisticated ones. It was just. I mean, I would recommend you do it. I think they have these classes. I'll maybe send
Mm-hmm.
it to you after this call. You can definitely
For
try
sure.
it.
Are you into watches too? Like, do you collect?
I am not really. I mean, I don't collect or anything of that sort, but I appreciate a good watch, and uh, I think with more capital, I probably will start collecting. But I appreciate good watches. I think uh, I would love to learn more about it for sure.
What's the best piece that you have?
I have a Rolex which my dad has given me.
Oh, I love the hand-me-down watches. Like they almost have like a legacy to it.
Yeah,
I think I recently saw like a date just which someone's grandfather gave it to. I mean,
yeah,
their whatever
yeah.
grandson.
But that's not something I've collected. That's something that is more like a family heirloom now. It's like stays in.
What do you think about the watch space in general? Like the way watches are priced. Let's say
Yeah,
the way Rolex is priced, or the way some other brands
yeah.
are priced.
Of course, I think it's really expensive, but I think um, see, I think something like like a really well-made watch, which has a
Mm-hmm.
brand, and there's a lot of engineering
Mm-hmm.
behind it. It's something you can keep forever, right? So that's what I appreciate. That even if you spend money on it, something you can keep. Um, and I think definitely there's a lot more. Like I've seen it come up a lot during the pandemic. Uh, People wanting to collect these things and learn more about them. Uh, I think that's an interesting development. Um, and I mean, yeah, I can also possibly see myself doing that long term. Um, but I like the way they, and I don't. There's also a sense of like you have smartwatches and they do a great job. Like even
Mm-hmm.
this Casio has its own. Uh,
Yeah,
I think it's also something very personal to you, right? Like some people just don't give
sure.
a shit. They're like, okay, I can see my
Yeah.
watch on my. I don't know. I think especially when I went to that class, right? I think it's very uh, what's the not polarizing, but like it's at extremes where you have okay, a bunch of people really into it, and then there are people who just like don't care.
For sure.
So that's the interesting bit about it for sure.
So, okay, enough about watches. Let's get into VC again. So, what are certain metrics that you look at while you're
Yeah,
evaluating a
we do
consumer?
seed stage.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't too many metrics, but you do look at, let's say, how business is projecting to grow. If it's done some business, you look at basic economics and all that. But see, at a very early stage, it's a lot of the bet is on the team, because we look like the companies I mentioned. A lot of them were pre-revenue, right? So there aren't numbers to analyze. You bet a lot on the individual, and you look at the market also. That's where some analysis does go into the how big the market is it growing, is there enough disruption possible here. So that analysis does happen. Taking Mokobara for example, large space, not too many brands, not been disrupted. Maybe you need uh, maybe there's possibility of a challenger brand. You have a brand like Away Luggage in the US, which has come up. You have something like Remova, which has built a lot of aspiration around travel and lifestyle as a luggage brand. So there's been a lot of action, and that's something you learn and see in the market. And then you can also go deeper into India, see the price points has been built at, right? You have Samsonite, but you don't have something just cheaper to it, which has built a very strong brand, which is where Mokobara comes in. You have the massier brands. Can you build something that people want to premiumize to? And at the same time, then of course it's on the team. And do you like working with them? Do you like their vision? I think when we met Mokowara, they already had the product ready, and it's actually what the product is now, right? At least the first cabin luggage is the same product that they launched back then. So even then, like when you see it, like okay, wow, this is a great piece of work. Right? So then you're confident to back a team like that. I think There it was a different story where you have to, uh, as a fund, continue backing them when the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic hits. Right, we put in our money in
Yeah.
March first week of 2020, I think.
How does that feel like? Just putting the check and then the next month the country is shutting down.
I mean, see, I mean, kudos to like
Mm-hmm.
Manu, right? I think he really guided the team, was really disciplined, and wasn't like, you know, apocalyptic about what's happened, right? And I think, really continued advising him, not just Manu, but like also the our advisors who were there. So I think um, Manu obviously guided us to help them, but it for me it was more about learning from that experience, right? And I think it's incredible how it's worked out.
See, I always have this question when we jump back into the COVID period or something like that. So weirdly, funding skyrocketed like back in the day, like when I think COVID hit. I think during that point of time. Why do you think was that? Considering everything was technically shut and not a lot of people were spending that much. So why do you think funding skyrocketed? And immediately after that, once the country opened up, there was a funding winter for a bit.
I mean, markets go through cycles. That's just the nature of markets, right? It's not a machine, right? It's not a rational machine. It's based on what humans think, and humans are emotional, and it moves like a pendulum, and like it happens, right? So if I think about uh, when I started my career, it was very hot market, and then um, you know, uh, I think with Myra's uh, inability to raise, the market sort of became colder, and then again became hot again. 2019 was pretty good year. 2020 again, very weak year. So it's just the nature of markets, right? Like I think you could attribute that specifically. What happened with COVID was that I think people realized we would be able to survive this, and that's why they're able to be more comfortable with that risk that COVID comes with, and therefore start deploying, capital a lot more behind these kind of asset classes.
Perfect. Okay, I think we were at
Sorry.
cryptocurrency and how it changed in 2023. And that's where I think we
Yeah,
stopped. That was
and then again in 2023, people. I mean, I'm not an economist, but there were a lot of interest rate cuts and how that affects banks, and then you have, I think it was Silicon Valley Bank that went down. I think that's like a different uh, thing altogether. You can study and learn about how there are other factors which affect this, wars, etc., all of that. But my understanding is definitely that markets move in cycles, right? So, and uh, the cyclical nature is because of sort of some factors coming in together, and there are different times that sort of attribute to that. Like in 2008, the financial crisis is because of the housing bubble, right?
yeah.
Um, so and then after that, after the we got out of that, things improved, etc. All of that. I was in school when that happened, right? So I don't know how that felt when you're working in the economy, but I can see that, okay, up and down, etc. So that's the way that it works.
What do you think about the cryptocurrency space as you mentioned it? Like for the general consumer, like what do you think about the space? Like, do you think apps built on top of that, like dApps and stuff, do you think these applications have like a future? Considering the only thing they're sort of replacing are the logistics side of things. Because this is a take from I believe, yes, Dinesh from Zero. I had him on the show I think a year or so before, and I talked about like the general dApp space and how it compares with the fintech one. And his answer was pretty simple. He's like, they're just replacing logistics. Other than that, he doesn't see a merit in it. What do you think about that? What do you think about the Web3 space? Like, what do you think about all that?
See, I mean, cryptocurrency in Web 3.0 has, I mean, people have been working on this for some time, right? In the pandemic, it got a lot more media attention, but
Yeah.
people have been working in this space before that, right? I have a friend who has been in this space for the longest time, and in fact, he's the one who advised me to buy some crypto in
Hmm.
2020, which I made a lot of money on. But
Interesting.
um, uh, I think there hasn't been a mainstream use case, uh, a practical
Hmm.
mainstream use case for cryptocurrency or any of the products that have come out, right? Um, in my life, nothing has sort of, I've switched to, right? I'm not on Decentraland. I'm not, you know, in any metaverse. I'm not,
Hmm.
uh, I use Brave browser, but
Yeah.
I don't use the cryptocurrency of Brave, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
So I've not, uh, I don't think there has been any mainstream practical use case applied of it. I
Hmm.
think what has taken up is two things. One is uh, Bitcoin for sure. I think just
Hmm.
it's looked at as a replacement for digital gold. I think that the fact that it's digital in nature, it can be transferred easily. All that gives it value. There's a limited nature to it.
Hmm.
All that gives it value. And I think a lot of people made a lot of money off it. And I think people are trying to um, get into it because they made money off it, but
Yeah.
no real underlying wealth creation that's sort of happening. Like when I speak about other companies, you could say that, yeah, it's employing more people or it's building products. There's a factory being set up. Like there's a real hard thing going behind,
Hmm.
right? I don't know what Bitcoin has really done in that sense, right? Apart from just a supply and demand kind of issue. Um,
For sure.
maybe there are use cases that have come up which I'm unfamiliar with, but I don't. I mean, in my bubble of existence, not so much.
Interesting. Do you follow like math in general? Like, is that something you're interested in?
Math.
Yeah, mathematics, probability, mathematics, stuff like that.
I mean, I don't really follow, but like, I mean, yeah, you learn.
There's like a video from Nassim Nicholas Taleb, if you know him. He's like a very
Yeah,
famous
of course.
Lebanese
I know who he is.
mathematician. Yeah, so there's a video he made on how Bitcoin's value is actually equal to zero, and he had his own hypothesis on it, which even I watched the video thrice, and still at the end of
Send it
it,
to me. I'll love to see it. I follow him on
mhm.
Twitter again. So
Yeah, he's a little bit like too active on Twitter. Yeah, yeah. He
yeah.
has his own. He had this thing. He has beef with everybody, which is interesting.
No, I think he's very good thinker for sure.
For sure, for
Good
sure, for
too.
sure. I've read like his books. Like I've read the Inserto in and out. Like it's fun. Like it took me, I think, it took me 2 to 3 reads to understand maybe 30% of it. Because considering the way he writes is it's very different. Right? When you look at any other general authors,
I have Fooled by Randomness. Somebody gifted it
yeah.
me for Christmas. I have to read it, yeah. But I'll
You should try.
definitely take out some time, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit more conversational in general than other books. Like I think
Okay.
Talib is
That's good
not.
actually. I
Yeah,
would probably enjoy that, yeah.
considering it's not, it's like non-fiction. And it's conversational, which it makes it more interesting. Because usually like non-fiction is meant to be like boring, a little bit more like.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to sort of think more. But either be sochna padta hai, but like it's still a little bit more better. I think
Yeah.
the problem with most Taleb books is he tries to convolute a lot of things. I think that's because of how smart he is in general. Because I mean, मतलब, the इधर से ऐसे खाता है. That's the problem. But in general, he's very smart. That's what I've noticed. What books do you read?
I mean, I read, let me see. This year I read Scott Adams. He's the creator of Dilbert. He
Yeah,
has
follow him on Twitter.
what's that book? Let me just how to fail at everything and still kind of make it big. It's
Hmm.
a good. I think it's again very conversationalist in nature, non-fiction. he's he's a real guy. He lives in the real
Mm-hmm.
world and he gives you real advice. I think that's a very good book. I read Joys of Compounding, which is
Hmm.
by Gautam Bain, who's a famous value investor, and he's used a lot of stuff by other value guys. Uh, what else is there on my shelf?
Scott Adam has his own, like, he has this thing called Coffee with Scott Adams, right? I believe.
Yeah, yeah, he does. Then I have uh, How Adam Smith. Wait. An Unexpected Guide to Happiness, or How Adam Smith can change your life. So that book is so Adam Smith is known for The Wealth of Nations, but he also wrote
Yeah.
a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments.
Hmm.
So this economics professor learned about that book. His name is Russ Roberts, and he wrote about his interpretation of theory of moral sentiments. So it's again a very interesting book about uh,
Mm-hmm.
how you can live your life according to Adam Smith's moral teachings.
Interesting.
Um,
Am I missing
yeah.
something, or Adam Smith is the guy behind capitalism and the theory in general?
Now, The Wealth of Nations.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah, he's the one who wrote that. Yes, he's considered one of those guys. And I think people who really look at him for capitalism and who have read Wealth of Nations, they may really enjoy reading this because it's like
Mm-hmm.
the same guy who talks about capitalism also talks about moral science
Morals.
in a
Yeah.
very interesting way, right? Yeah,
Do you
there's
write as well?
uh, just
Like
not as much,
blog,
but
Substack?
maybe I would love to write more, man. I think uh,
Do you
it's,
consider like having your own, let's say, reports and stuff like that under Sauce? Because I've heard it's like from
we
people,
do.
I've heard it's, yeah, you do.
Yeah, yeah, no, we
Understood.
do have our own reports.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we share with LPs every quarter. It's a very good exercise for yourself, for your understanding to get, speak to the portfolio, see how they're doing, and we do a pretty detailed one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really good for the investor to also understand what is up with the asset. So that's something we definitely do. Uh, yeah.
Have you seen the influx of attention given towards like a lot of VC reports and stuff, like after the Indus Valley report, like I think the second last one that came out, after that everybody's like into reading VC reports. That's what I've realized. I think now the bottom line is something which I tried reading, didn't finish it yet, but I
Yeah,
think
I mean, for sure. I think there's some really good content out there that some of the investors have made. In this Valley report is also quite good. I learned a lot. Uh, and
yeah,
yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going out. I think I now I realize your question on reports was more on generally. I was
yeah,
talking
more
more
in
about
general, yeah.
investor report, but even that's important to be honest. Both are funds do both. Uh,
Like in case
the good
you're building like one of those ever, and if you need any help, I mean, I'll be down to work on it, because I find that space very interesting in general. So if I'm ever of help to you,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, sure. See, I think, yeah, sure. I don't think it's on the cards, but sure, I'll let you.
interesting. Let's jump to wearable AI and AI tech in general, because that's the talk of the town.
Again, I am
And
not talking as an investor here, I'm talking as a normal guy.
that's fair. That's fair. What do you think about it? Like, do you think having a wearable
I
AI
saw the
mechanism,
Humane AI demo.
pin, yeah, the pin, right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think it was marketed really well. Like the way very Apple-esque, and I think they're ex-Apple people, right?
yeah.
That's
One
what
of
I was
them
really,
worked for like 20 something years. The other one worked for 8. Yeah.
yeah. Then I saw a demo of someone using the product, and they went on their hand like 30 times to make a call. I was like, okay, no, no way I'm going to do that. Like, I
Yeah.
just opened my phone, I can call. Um, so that was a bit counterintuitive. I think some of the stuff you shared with me. Um, okay, look. So one thing that I think could really work is smart glasses. Okay,
Very interesting.
I anywhere wear glasses. Okay, I think. Uh, Integrating it to something that people already wear is better as opposed to adding something new. Like I think adding a pin is a bit more difficult for me, especially. As I said, I wear glasses, right? If I start getting information around let's say there's a cup of coffee, how hot it is, that'd be
Yeah.
great, right? So I don't burn my tongue. If I
Hmm.
see, instead of opening my phone, I can already see, okay, these messages are there, so I don't have to check it. That's great. Maybe there's an emergency call happening. I can get that on my glass, right? As opposed to having to listen to my phone, like I'm on a, let's say, a
Yeah.
run or something, or I'm in the gym. Even let's say some use cases for when I'm doing sports, right? Like air
Hmm.
pistol shooting. There's so many things I can think
Yeah.
of that can help me
Very
with, right?
interesting.
Um, I like the glasses, smart glasses, and I probably would buy if I get that. Other
Did you look at
formats
the
till
Ray-Ban ones?
I've used the Ray-Ban one. Um,
How is that?
I so it was for my best friend. He got married in December. He has the
Mm-hmm.
glasses, so I tried them. Um,
Hmm.
I use them for photographs and video recording. The
Yeah.
photographs are really cool because it's a perspective that you don't get otherwise, similar
Yeah.
to like GoPro kind of perspective. I thought that was really interesting. Uh, and I think for people who like to create content, it can be really cool. I didn't get to use other capabilities, but I mean, like with the music, etc. I think it's promising,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, like you said, if you integrate AI and start building things, it could be really cool.
Sure. So I think yeah. So do you know what went wrong with the Google glasses, like when they launched like previously?
I honestly don't know, man. Not sure.
Like I'll tell you what happened. So I did
Yeah.
like a weird presentation on this little time back, so I kind of researched on it. So the way Google Glasses worked was on the right side there was like a huge ass camera. Like you
Yeah.
could see, whereas on the Ray-Ban ones you can barely see the camera. I mean, apart
Yeah,
from
you
when you're
can.
recording,
Yeah.
you can't see the camera. So and it turned out to be very intrusive because and you could see the tiny screen from
Yeah.
the frame.
That's a problem.
And just think about it. If I'm roaming around with like a phone in my hand, it's exactly like that, right? And that was I think 2013 or 2012, and surprisingly, people used to call Google Glass users glass holes. Like that. That's what the term these guys use for Google Glass, and it like failed miserably. But like with Ray-Ban ones, I think it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more It's more acceptable, right? If you think about it, it's just there. I mean, you don't mind unless like the flash is on when you're recording, which is, I mean, obviously it's a good thing. You can't just record people without their consent. But that's that. What do you think about the Rabbit R1, the new AI pocket thingy?
You mind if I open it up right now?
For sure, for sure. Like in
Rabbit.
general, I'll try to tell you like what it is trying to do. So it's basically it's like it works on a large action model. What it does is it's almost like it's like a headless computer, a headless assistant that you have. It's almost like Siri, but like kind of better. It
Okay.
doesn't have any powerful processors on it. Like it requires the internet. It works completely off of cloud. That's why it's that cheap. It's like some $200, whereas the human plan was six ninety
Yeah.
nine. So
Yeah.
that's that, and it can just help you like book cabs, send messages. I think very simple like normal Siri task. I mean, I think that's something it tries to do, and the weird thing about this is Rabbit is trying to compete directly with the smartphone market, which seems like a big ask, right? It seems like a tall order simply because the, the time you use on your phone is more to do with like entertainment, like
Too
scrolling and stuff
addictive,
like that.
dude. Phones. Too
Yeah,
addictive. That's the
exactly.
problem.
Yeah, and if you think about the utility usage for a phone, if you just go at the screen time, you'll see it's like barely 10 minutes. Like how
Yeah.
long is someone talking on the phone for? Like at least right now, people just use Meet or something like that.
Yeah.
So, in while competing with the smartphone and removing the major retention element, which is let's say Instagram or something like that, I think that's somewhere these guys might fail, and everybody sort of thinks that because it's just a utility device which you can use as a substitute to Siri. In fact, I mean that's the only logical use case I see, but
Mm.
that's that. Do you think replacing phones is sort of
I,
possible?
I I don't think so right now. I think uh, smartphones are very convenient. At least in our job, we do use so much WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's used for so much, man. Like entertainment, photography, communication, music. Like it's endless. Like gaming. Like it's so diverse, right? Like you can use it for so much, right? And it's designed. Some of the apps are so addictive, right? Like It's hard, man. Like you have to have a really, really, really good use case for it, right? I think that's I think a device which helps you detox might do better than like something which
Sure,
replaces it. It's
sure.
just really, really hard. I think, yeah.
Another weird thing that I sort of realized about AI, wearable AI, is that it's tough to use that when you're, let's say, in a public place. Let's say, in a metro, for example, or in a subway. Like you
Yeah,
cannot really just say,
yeah. Right now, since it's so different, like you will get eyes at you. Like, what is this guy doing? Like talking to some shit.
yeah,
And, yeah.
like, hey, Meta, text XYZ, and if you want to text something a little bit more personal, it's difficult to do because it'll just better to use your phone and like sort of text
Yeah.
in
Also,
most
like,
cases.
I mean, and especially in India, like it's so crowded, and it's a bit
Hmm.
difficult, right? Wherever you are, maybe if you're like alone, working in like that perfect privacy, and like okay, then you want to be really. I don't think that happens in such a perfect manner. Maybe during the pandemic, and you're working from home,
Sure,
maybe then, but I don't really see it.
makes sense. What do you think about the current AI wrappers that are being built on top of, I mean, general APIs that are
I
available to everybody? Do you
I mean,
think those consumer products?
I
Yeah,
use Chat GPT. I use the GPTs. I think that's pretty useful.
sure.
Um,
Like I mean, like let's say the API is available to everybody, right? On a certain subscription model. So the way most like indie builders, like they're just building wrappers around it. Let's say like a chat with PDF thingy, or just like a summarizer, right? Something of that sort, or like an email writer based on, let's say, it goes through your LinkedIn, sees what words you use, what stuff you're interested about, and drafts a cold email with respect to your uh, LinkedIn profile, something like that. So what do you think about those products, just like wrappers on top of the existing API? What do you think that's
yeah.
something?
See, I mean, for example, with the example you gave me, that
Hmm.
a wrapper, so a wrapper that helps you with cold emails, right?
Yeah,
That's a great use case, right? Because cold emails are not that complicated. You need
sure.
to have a short introduction, a short to the point on why you're reaching out. If you're selling something, then maybe it has to be a little bit more elaborate. But most cold emails I've sent are the ones which are like nice and short, which sort of work. And
Hmm.
if you can get that automated, and also make it a little bit personalized, send across, and why not, right? Like I think that's a very good use case, and that's just one example we're getting deep into, right? I think if you're building wrappers for other automated or tasks where you don't really need or shouldn't need to spend time, right? Why not,
Hmm.
right? Well, it'd be really good, right? For example, uh, if I think of a VC kind of use case, let's say someone, a rapper that just analyzes the LinkedIn profile of the founder and just tells me, okay, this is the highlights of that background, right? Why not? I mean, even though the LinkedIn profile is anyway highlights, but just to
Yeah.
summarize it in one place, right?
Hmm.
That'd be helpful to know that, okay, they have experience in building consumer brands. Great. It's easier for me to understand their background, or maybe be better prepared for the call or meeting that I have with them. And it just doesn't have to be founders. It can be, for example, my call with you. I could have just learned about your background before the call through an AI wrapper here, and I say, okay, Yash, he's a computer science guy. He's done these many episodes. He talks about this, etc. It adds more context, right? So
Yeah.
I think it can be very interesting, and I think it's just start of a lot of innovation that's going to happen. And yeah, I think it's scary for some people as well, but also interesting. So let's see what happens.
Like a very generic question from my end, but I ask this to everybody who's sort of
Yeah.
at least interested about how the future entail. And considering you're a VC, I mean that's something which you definitely are interested about. So, what do you think? Do you think jobs in general are going to change due to the advent of AI? Like, what's your ideal uh, 2020,
Yes.
let's say 2030 Earth
Yes.
looking like? How will that
Yeah.
look like?
See, I can't predict the future. If I could, I'd be the richest man on
Yeah,
earth. But uh,
sure.
again, like I look at patterns, and you can see patterns in history, right? Creative destruction is a part of humanity. Uh, you go back couple of decades. You have the refrigerator, which was invented. and people who
Mm.
used to work in the ice industry are out of a job, right? Overnight, you don't need a whole bunch of people lugging ice and any of that. You just get ice, you put some water in your fridge, freezer, and you're done, right? You
Sure.
have ice at home. Um, you have, I mean, and that's one simple example of things that have happened across, right? What happened to all the people who lost their job in the ice industry? You know, maybe they pivoted, maybe their kids are maybe different in person, maybe some of them doing a lot much better now. I think that how things evolve is something that no one knows how that happens.
Mm.
But I think the nature of jobs changing will continue happening, right? I think, for example, uh, like you had a lot of typists back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
People
Yeah,
whose entire job was to record and record keep. You don't need that, right?
for sure.
Uh, or for example, this call that we set up, we just use something on Google Calendar, etc. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
maintain notes for that, right? Everything is on one
Mm-hmm.
place. Uh, so all these things keep happening, right? Like uh, maybe driverless cars, you know,
Mm-hmm.
autopilot things. That's something people are working towards. It could happen. Uh, AI, for
For
example,
sure.
ChatGPT is supposed to be good at a lot of things, not good at a lot of other stuff. Maybe good at automating things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Maybe humans can focus more on creative things.
Sure.
All these. So to summarize, yes, I think it's cyclical. This change, it's happened before. Maybe this is the greatest invention we've
Mm-hmm.
had yet. Who knows? We'll see what happens 20, 30 years of time. I think, and but if I had to gaze and like guess, I think that um, personally, like what I've seen for myself when I'm using it, I think it has actually increased my productivity because I
For
can
sure.
actually do a lot of simple stuff through it, right? I don't, and it can just churn out stuff so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's also making me more productive, right? I think um, uh, some of my, although like other jobs where you can't replace AI, that obviously will not happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need relationships, etc. Like right now, in AI can't do this
Sure.
right now. You are recording, you're talking
Not
to
yet.
me.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you're an AI. I don't know yet, but uh,
There's this thing. Do you know there's this thing called like an AI podcast that has been running? There's a Joe Rogan AI experience if you heard of it. Like
wow.
they've used like the entire plethora of episodes that Joe Rogan has. Removed the Joe Rogan's speech and figured out what all he's interested in, how he talks, what words he uses, and then they have like separate guests who haven't ever been the part of the Joe Rogan show, and they similarly look for the content that that guy has spoken, or then they have like a proper recorded podcast
Mm.
which sounds real because it's trained on what the guy has
Wow.
said before, so it will sound similar. I might be an AI, who knows? So that's
That's
something.
well, that's a
Yeah,
bit.
always.
I
Mm-hmm.
think I don't know if we've reached that level of sophistication yet to completely replace.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I mean, if you ask me, I think human ability to be creative and invent is infinite, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
even if AI can do a lot of things, recreate, I think that anxiety, I mean, it is there, it naturally comes. But I think we hopefully will be able to navigate it in a better way for sure. Like, I think,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you talk about this Joe Rogan podcast, right? You said that
Mm-hmm.
it's an AI, but without a Joe Rogan to exist as
Yeah,
a human
you can't
being,
have one. Mm-hmm.
you can't have that, right? And I think as humans, uh, let's say this AI is able to recreate this podcast forever, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and but you would also probably get bored of it, right? That is because if
Sure.
this, because even as humans you keep changing, right? So an
Mm.
AI can't do that.
Once it's hard to tell, like how would you realize if it's AI or not? Was right? Because was if you know this new AI influencer thing that's been popping up. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and people don't seem to realize
Hey,
it. And it's just like, this is
I've
real.
seen that. I've seen
Hmm.
that virtual influencers.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to spot who is who isn't. There's been some mid journey stuff which has been like, I mean, I don't know, in
Yeah,
the
the
70s.
V6 is crazy, by the way. It has a, I forgot the term. It's called it
Yeah,
oversets, basically. It oversets. So the problem with that is it makes it way too real. Like if you ask it to generate like anything, let's say like a water bottle from the Nike water bottle, for example, it will give you the exact image of the Nike water bottle. Like it has an oversetting problem. It almost recreates existing images, and that's probably a reason why Midjourney is getting sued for, because it
mm,
recreates normal film scenes. If you type in Midjourney V6,
yeah,
let's say
yeah,
Thanos destroying the world, and it gives you a scene, and if you compare it to the actual scene which is in the movie, it's strikingly similar, which it shouldn't be. If it's overset, it's basically recreating existing stuff, which in general ML shouldn't be doing. Like that's not how it's supposed to be.
yeah,
It's supposed to amalgamate stuff and give
yeah,
a generally different output. Because the way earlier Midjourney or DALL-E used to work is you would rarely find two similar outputs, like one in a, I think it was one in a billion or something. Like you'd never find like exactly similar outputs. But now with V6, it's called overfitting, by the way. It's not oversetting. So you'll find a couple of very similar outputs, which is very weird, and that's exactly the reason why Midjourney is getting sued for. I think that's why I believe that's why they have stopped funding, if I'm not wrong. Like they are not funded because they'll get sued or
right,
something based on that. It's a weird thing how Midjourney is sort of navigating this. But
yeah,
another weird, or let's say an uncommon take that I have is AI creativity is very similar to how human creativity works. And I'll tell you why. I mean, it sounds like a weird take from the first glance, but the way
mm,
even humans are creative, they just look at something in their life, let's say a random scene from X, random scene from Y, and then when they get down to actually creating stuff, X and Y are the only inspirations that they have in their brain. Whereas the way AI models work, or generative AI models work, it's pretty similar. They're trained on some data that they have seen before, they're trained upon before, and they build something based on top of it. It
mm,
sounds something which even humans do, but on a more, I think on a more narrow level, because our experiences are not as extensive as how the training data is, because training data is, I mean, several billion parameters, right? Whereas we have just lived
right.
for a couple of years. But I think human creativity in a way is more replaceable, at least at this.
Mm.
That's what I think. Like, what's your general take on what I just said? Like, what do you think about this?
Uh, See, I mean, again, like I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, right? I'm just really basis
Hmm.
what I know thus far, right? And maybe I should go deeper to maybe give you a better answer. But I think human creativity is unmatched. Uh, I think that uh, our ability to even use AI
Hmm.
is what will drive it, right? I think we will use
Yes.
AI to then enhance our own ability to be creative. I don't think we will get stifled by it. Um,
Hmm.
um, and I think uh, I think that even though it's such a powerful tool, right, it is still a tool. I think it's there is a maybe an infinitely complex nature of how the real world is, which will be unable to recreate, right?
Hmm.
And some of the questions that or the anxieties it brings, I think because it's a little bit more real, people
Hmm.
are a little bit more anxious, but the anxiety is similar to other philosophical questions, right? And then the way to answer those is not by being anxious about it, but by thinking about it, seeing that okay, is it possible, all that, and just probably deciding to believe in what you want anyway, right?
Interesting.
And that's where I'm at. That yeah,
Sure, makes sense. I think that kind of summarizes our AI conversation. Let's get back to consumer
yeah,
VC, because we have been deviating way too much. Uh, so
yeah. Yeah,
yeah, I
sorry.
think it's almost 9, and we were supposed to end at 8:30. Is
Yeah,
it fine if we go
maybe
on for like
like
10:50?
you should like really cut this
Yeah, for
edit it
sure.
very sharply. Yeah,
Do you have like 20-25 minutes more, or like
Yeah,
is
let me just check it. Sorry. Yeah, why let's continue, and then if I have to stop, I'll just tell you. Yeah,
for sure. So let's get to consumer VC again, right? So there are a lot
yeah.
of terms being thrown around in general, like TAMs, like CSC, and stuff like that. What are the more important ones that everybody needs to sort of know in order to, let's say, evaluate a company, a consumer company? What are certain
A
metrics that everybody
consumer
kind of
company.
needs to know? Yeah.
See, I mean, it depends on the stage you're looking at the company, but I think um, I can tell you a seed stage. I think you should look at the brand, how it's positioned. I think you should look at the product. You should understand the market. What is the gap they're fulfilling? You
Mm-hmm.
should understand the supply chain and see where the differentiation is coming in. And you should also uh, uh, also look at economics and see whether it's scalable for this. Because there are many good businesses which don't necessarily have to scale. So how
Mm-hmm.
do you differentiate that from the rest? And go deep into each of it to see where it sort of works, right? Um, what sort of GTM should they use when they're beginning, right? Like for example, a lot of our brands start first digitally because that's a way to build a brand in a different way compared to the incumbents. But it could be more expensive, so you also have to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that it can scale offline, right? So all these things have to be kept in mind. I could keep going on and on, man, but broadly, it's like you look at the brand, product, supply chain, team, market, gap, GTM, channel strategy, all of that, economics, etc., all of that, and see how it will scale.
Very interesting. What do you look for in a founder for like consumer product?
Uh, See, in a product for sure, we'll look for something that's fulfilling a gap or trying to differentiate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's say with Blue Tokai, right? There is it's coffee, but it's packaged better. It
Mm-hmm.
it smells, tastes better.
Yes.
They communicate to you a lot better. It appeals to someone who like a young guy like you, that you want to
Yes.
try something new, right? And that's only natural. You don't want to. You're you're a different generation. You want a different generation of brand of coffee for
Yes.
yourself, right? Um, so that is definitely, and I think for a founder, yeah, I think there are different things you look for. I think uh, it's a very long term journey, so you have to see if they have the drive, hustle, skill set, ambition, and you also have to work with them. Like we've
Mm-hmm.
been working with these founders for now 5 years, maybe another 5 years to go, right? So um, you have to also see the fitment that you enjoy working with them. Also, that's it's a very simple thing, right? Uh, and they and there is a lot that founders look for in you, but they also have to see that in you, right? They have to see that,
Yeah.
okay, uh, is this an investor they want to work with? So they should also do their research, do reference checks, see, okay, is Zoeb someone who they want to work with? Is there someone that they, or do they ask the right questions? Are they bringing enough value? Are they, backing me when things are
Mm-hmm.
down? So it's not so much on what I'm also looking. They should also look for because it works either way, right? It's not
Sure.
just uh,
So
and
there's this
man,
thing that
it's a
I've, yeah,
very,
continue.
takes a village. It's a long journey.
Mm-hmm.
That happens.
For sure, because there's this thing that I've realized about a couple of VC firms is that they have their own CTO, they have their own, like VC firms having their own CTO, VC firms having their own, let's say, accounts guy. I mean, for
Yeah,
who help the portfolio
CTO
companies.
or CFO?
Yeah,
Sorry.
a CTO for tech and like a CFO for like the guys the portfolio
Yeah,
companies
yeah.
finances. I think 100x does it, and Vatsal was the CTO back then. And is that
Um,
something you guys do? Like have your
um,
own tech guys in your own VC firm help out
no,
the portfolio
not really,
companies?
because we don't really have too much tech in our companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that kind of specialization yet. We do have advisors who help us, who come on
Mm-hmm.
board based on the expertise on marketing or some industry. Um, so that happens.
Okay.
Um,
How does like a founder find the right VC firm for the product? What metrics should I look at? What are certain things
See,
we should be looking at?
cool. So see, firstly, you have to look for the right VC at the right stage. Okay, if you are a seed stage company, you go to seed stage VCs. That's one. Second is you want to look at and find a VC who understands your sector, right? Because you want someone who uh, knows your industry, right? You don't want someone. You don't want to ideally work with a VC who doesn't have that mandate, doesn't invest, right? For example, if a SaaS founder uh, not SaaS, but like let's say fintech founder comes to me, right? I can't really help them because I've never built anything. Even I've not even worked in fintech, right? So I can't
Hmm.
really help them. And uh, so that's second. Third is that I think for the journey that they're building it for, they should also sort of check and see if this is the right VC fit for them, right? I think uh, similar to how we probably may do a reference check on okay, how does this founder work with other individuals? They should do that on their VC. That okay, speak to other founders we've backed. How do they talk about you? Right? Is it positive, negative? All that sort of matters. Um, so yeah, so it's that's how they sort of find it, right? So stage, sector, and reference.
Interesting. How do VC firms minimize risk, considering, I mean, it's one of the more riskier forms of handling or putting money into certain sectors. Like, what's your way to minimize risk, figuring out you're mitigating certain factors?
I mean, there are different ways. There's there's no direct answer to this, but some ways are like, let's say you maybe back a founder who's had experience. It's sort of easier. Having
Mm-hmm.
said that, it's that's not the case. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've seen founders who've never started a company who've done incredibly well. It's always case by case basis, but
Mm-hmm.
you could argue someone with the right skill set, the right team. You could argue that is it a market where there is enough space to build? Like for example, we spoke about air pistol in the beginning, but like if someone started air
Mm-hmm.
pistol company, I wouldn't back them because I know it's a good niche market, right?
Very niche. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh, so you also want to invest in something that could have a large enough outcome. That's also a factor. Uh, what else?
How do you calculate market size? Like in general, because this is something which
Market
everybody should kind
size.
of know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it, actually, a lot of it is very well reported. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at public companies, a lot of them track market sizes of their. And if you search market size on like Google, you search, you'll find for almost every market, it's very well tracked. If it's not a track, then people use guesstimation, supply and demand way to arrive at that number. But this is something that's tracked very well.
Very interesting.
Across industries. Like that Aventus report I told you about, it has the
Mm-hmm.
size of every market, how much is in digital, and that's something that they've researched on. Like a lot of banks, investment banks, thought leaders, they do all this.
How does pre-revenue funding work? Like, what factors do VC firms look at while there's no revenue,
Yeah,
whereas it's just an idea?
yeah.
Like,
See,
how
like
works
I
this?
mentioned earlier, it's a bet on the team, it's a bet on the market. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is there someone you want to work with? Can you see some outcome coming in? See, because at pre-revenue things are different, right? Like if I talk about Innovest, right? At pre-revenue it was called Bare Anatomy.
Hmm.
It was a customized hair care solution, but the company went through pivots and then it is what it is today. So then you back a team, you back someone who's trying to build something in the personal care space. Both are good, then it works out. Maybe that thesis doesn't work, you pivot from that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you really look at this stage.
Very interesting. Okay, so we're almost at the end of the podcast. I do this cliche ending, but I think this is something which is kind of required. We
Yeah.
started with the cliche beginning and like cliche ending. So, what are the three pieces of advice that you would give for a founder who's building in the consumer space?
I
What are three things?
honestly, I mean, see, I think I think it's important to um, definitely, you're building the consumer space. Think for the consumer first, for sure. Like solve a gap, try to solve a pain point, try to think the way they do, right? What is it that they are aspiring to, right? Whether that's in the product or the packaging, the price point, um, and how they consume, right? So just really try to empathize and step into the shoes of your consumer. Also, your other stakeholders, retailers, distributors. Second is, I think, there is I think there are a lot of good companies we can learn from. As an investor, we also learn from publicly traded companies how they build things. So you don't really have to reinvent as much as you have to really learn what's the right thing to copy. And I think a lot of different companies have done that. And the third is that uh, you know you can choose an investor wisely. I think because it's also a very long term journey. Um, uh, we also don't really know. The third piece of advice is that we don't necessarily have all the right advice. We could get it wrong, and I think because the reality is that it honestly takes a very large set of different people to build a good outcome, right? I think, and founders have to really lead us through it for sure, but it takes a lot of different folks, and I think it's good to keep that in mind.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Zoeb. It's been a great time with the podcast. I hope
Thank
it's
you,
likewise.
thank you, thank you, Yash. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think we got into many different interesting topics, and yeah, I look forward to listening to it.
For
Yeah.
sure.